I never thought the rumors were true. They said women who came to our neighborhood gatherings were hungry for men. At first, I laughed it off. Just idle gossip, the kind that older men whisper over cheap beer, but the words lingered in my mind, curling around my thoughts at night, stirring a strange ache I hadn't wanted to admit. My name is Susan, 63 years old. I've lived in this quiet suburban street for nearly 3 decades. I divorced my husband 10 years ago, and though people often described me as graceful, lively, and dependable, the truth was simpler. I was lonely. Days were filled with errands, television, and the silence of an empty home. Sometimes, that silence felt louder than any noise. It was during one of those evenings, restless and craving a hint of company, that I decided to attend the community meeting. I told myself it was just for the sake of participation, maybe a drink, a laugh or two, yet deep down, something inside me longed for more. Something forbidden, something warm, something to remind me that I was still a woman who could be desired. When I walked into the old community hall, the air buzzed with laughter, glasses clinking, the scent of food and spilled wine. That was when I saw him, Michael. He was 66, a widower with kind eyes, and a quiet strength that drew me in before a single word was exchanged. There was a heaviness in his posture, but also a spark, as if life had disappointed him, yet hadn't fully extinguished his fire. And when our eyes met across the crowded room, something stirred in me, something I thought had died years ago. I didn't mean to stare, but my gaze kept returning to him, the way his hand wrapped around the glass, the slow, thoughtful way he nodded when someone spoke. It all carried a quiet magnetism. When he finally turned and noticed me, I felt my breath catch. "First time here?" he asked, his voice low and steady. I smiled, perhaps a little too quickly. Yes, I wasn't sure what to expect. Neither was I, at first, he replied, and his lips curved into the faintest smile, one that hinted at secrets not yet spoken. We ended up sitting together, our chairs, close enough that I could sense the warmth of his body. The conversation began politely. Neighbors, families, the usual stories. But as the night stretched on, there were moments when our eyes lingered too long, when our laughter brushed against silence and left behind something heavier, sweeter. I noticed the lines near his eyes, carved by years of both sorrow and smiles. I noticed, too, the way his gaze would drift, not rudely, but tenderly, toward the neckline of my blouse, as though he was remembering what it meant to want. And each time, a current rushed through me, igniting a part of myself I had kept buried. By the end of the evening, when most of the crowd was fading into drunken chatter, he leaned close. His shoulder brushed mine, light as a whisper. "You seem different," he murmured, "not like the others." The words sank into me, warming my skin like spilled wine. For the first time in years, I felt visible, seen not as a neighbor, not as a committee member, but as a woman. A week later, we met again. This time not in the noisy community hall, but in the quiet aftermath of a gathering, when most people had already gone home. I stayed behind to help stack the empty glasses and fold the chairs, and to my secret delight, so did he. "Seems we're the last ones," he said with a half smile, placing a tray on the counter. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing," I replied before I could stop myself. The silence that followed was charged, a silence filled not with absence, but with possibility. He reached for a bottle that had been forgotten in the refrigerator, a cold can of beer, and held it up. "Share it with me." We sat across from each other at the long table, the hall now dim and still. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, and outside, the cicadas sang into the night. He raised his can, and I raised mine, our hands brushing for the briefest second. That touch lingered longer than the taste of the drink itself. He asked about my life, my past, the years of marriage, and the quiet years after. I admitted the loneliness, though my voice trembled when I did. He listened without interruption, his eyes steady, warm, as though he understood every unspoken ache. When it was his turn, he spoke of his wife. Gone for 5 years now? And the emptiness that followed. His voice grew softer, and something inside me ached at the familiarity of his loss. By the time we finished the beer, the space between us had dissolved. I don't remember who leaned closer first. I only remember the rush of heat when our lips met. Hesitant, tender at first, then deeper, hungrier, as though both of us had been starving in silence for far too long. His hands were rough, yet gentle against my skin, sliding over my arm, as though rediscovering what it meant to touch. My breath quickened, my body leaned into his before my mind could protest. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a woman pretending to be whole. I felt alive. That night didn't end with a kiss. He walked me home, the two of us silent beneath the streetlights, our fingers brushing until finally, they lay together. When we reached my door, I should have said good night. I should have smiled politely, thanked him, and stepped inside alone. But when I turned the key, I whispered instead, stay. His eyes searched mine, not for permission, but for certainty. And when he stepped inside, closing the door behind him, my heart pounded in a rhythm I hadn't felt in decades. The living room seemed suddenly too small for the hunger between us. He touched my cheek, rough thumb trailing along my jaw, and I leaned into his hand as though it were the only warmth in the world. Our lips found each other again, no longer hesitant, no longer bound by caution. Clothes slipped away as naturally as shadows at dawn. His breath mingled with mine, his body pressing against me with a knee that mirrored my own. On the sofa, in the soft glow of the lamp, I felt his weight, his warmth, the steady pulse of a man who still longed, still desired, still lived. God, it's been so long, I whispered against his ear, shivering as his hands explored the curves I had thought forgotten. And when he entered me, slowly, deeply, I closed my eyes and let out a sound I didn't recognize. Half sob, half moan, a voice I thought I had lost with youth. We moved together clumsily at first, then with the urgency of two people who had been waiting too long. Each thrust, each gasp, stripped away the years of silence, filling me with a fierce reminder that I was still alive, still wanted, still capable of surrendering to pleasure. Afterwards, we lay tangled in the softness of the couch, our skin damp, our breaths uneven. He stroked my hair, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. There was no need. Finally, he murmured, maybe these gatherings aren't such a waste after all. I laughed, a quiet laugh that carried both relief and wonder. Maybe not. Because I understood now. Those neighborhood nights weren't simply about meetings or small talk. They were about something far more human, the desire to be seen, to be touched, to be alive in someone else's arms, if only for a while. And as I rested my head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, I realized I had stopped feeling alone. A photorealistic 4K image of an elegant, mature couple in their early 60s, sitting closely together on a sofa in a softly lit living room at night. The woman has short, stylish hair, wearing a silky blouse, slightly unbuttoned, her expression gentle yet subtly sensual. The man, silver-haired and in a casual shirt, leans closer, his hand resting lightly on her arm. The atmosphere is intimate, warm, and romantic, with soft golden lighting, blurred background, and a sense of tender closeness. The scene should suggest quiet passion, an emotional connection without being explicit.